Good evening. I'd like to welcome members to this evening's meeting of the Strategic Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and to members of the public who are listening in via the Zoom webcast this evening. We have a busy agenda for this evening. So firstly, to practical matters, we are not expecting a test of the building's fire alarm. So if the fire alarm does sound, it does mean that attendees should exit the building via the nearest exit, and the rallying point is near the rear of the car park. I'd like to remind members of the committee to please raise their hand if they wish to speak, and to ensure that their microphone is switched on when addressing an item for the benefit of the webcast and the recording, and switched off when not. I'll refer to the Scrutiny Office from Democratic Services if I need to record a vote or for any procedural matters. And so, without further ado, moving first to apologies. Have we received any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have received apologies from Councillor Stevenson, Councillor A. Brown with regard to agenda item 14A, Mr. Andreas Menzies and Mr. Peter French. Thank you.
We now go to the record of the minutes of the meeting of the 15th of June 2023. Does anybody have any amendments that they'd like to make to the minutes as currently drafted? There are no amendments. Could I therefore ask for a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. And a show of hands? Thank you.
All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you.
Terminology. Thank you.
Do we have any abstentions? Thank you. And do we have any against the minutes? No? Thank you. The minutes approved.
We now come to actions arising, and the one action is against Councillor Ross, namely myself, and the action was to speak with Councillors Beggy and Lambert in respect of their assistance in developing the proposed scrutiny improvement plan, given their membership of this committee in the past year. And I've spoken with Councillor Beggy and Lambert, and they are in agreement with the proposals as drafted. Come now to item 4. Declarations of interest. Do we have any interest to be declared this evening? There are no declarations of interest. Item 5, petitions, deputations and questions. Have we received any petitions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Questions with notice from members. Have we received any questions with notice from members?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And notice of motions from members. Have we received any notices of motions from members?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to the call-in of a decision. Have we received any call-ins of a decision?
No call-ins received, Chair.
Thank you. And we now come to item 9, Scrutiny Committee recommendations and outcomes. And this relates to a new process for reporting the recommendations of the Scrutiny Committee and the resulting outcomes. The table included in the agenda pack details the recommendations and the resulting outcome, and this document will be updated and presented to the Scrutiny Committee as and when recommendations are made. Does anybody have any comments or questions? No questions. Thank you. And I'd like then to move on to item 10, which is the review of the work plan. So the draft work plan, as currently understood, is included in the agenda pack. And what I will now set out is the process that is proposed to be followed for additions to the work plan. And the intention is that using the paper process, the committee should agree with which items, if any, from the pending items list should be included on the strategic overview and scrutiny committee's annual work plan. Once members agree, we will then use the PIC assessment process to help identify what method each subject matter should be scrutinized by. And this will be done outside of the committee meeting, and the results will be formally agreed at the next committee meeting. And items must be prioritized or ranked to ensure that scrutiny adds value and drives improvement. Are there any further questions on the proposed review of the work plan? Karen, Councillor Payne, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. I just remember the planning meeting and discussing the fact that we would include the financial outturn reports on the scrutiny plan. I can't see them in here.
Could you just repeat that?
Yes, when we had the original planning meeting,
Yes.
we decided that we would look, finance was important to us.
Yes.
And we should scrutinise the quarterly financial outturn reports. And I think that was a positive conversation, but I can't see them in the plan.
So as I'm given to understand, the dates for these are still to be agreed, and as and when they are agreed with finance, they will be included in the forward plan.
Okay, thank you. As long as they don't
So
fall off the plan.
it is an omission with dates to be advised, but it will be included.
Thank you.
Are there any other Councillor Powell?
Sorry, just for clarification then, at each meeting, we're looking at all the pending items and deciding whether any of those come forward into the work plan. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it is.
And will we be going through those today, the ones that are on the pending list?
We should go through those today. Yes.
Thank you. Keep going.
So the pending items are on page 18.
No.
No. Pending items. Pending items. And this is the updated version of the 15th of June. And the health, a proposal has been submitted in draft, as members are aware, and that is presently with Democratic Services. And therefore, at this meeting, we are not in a position to consider adding that item to the forward plan, and that will have to be deferred to the next meeting. And for that, I apologise for the progress that has been made in progressing that.
Sorry, Bradley,
Councillor Beggy.
I don't mean I should be pedantic, but you're interchangeably using the word forward plan and work plan. They are two very distinct things within the council.
Thank you. Thank you. That brings us to the item for leisure. And as we have still not received any proposal for that to be considered, a proposal needs to be submitted for consideration. that will be held over until the September-October meeting. Regarding the access to NHS dental services, which was considered at the in October 2022 and is presently scheduled for October 2023, there was an update to the health and wellbeing meeting held on the 27th of June, excuse me, which advised that there was essentially no change to the status that was reported to health to the committee in October 2022. We then come to item for possible consideration in December, which is customer service, and the intention is that will be considered as and when a proposal is forthcoming. With regard to the item of waste, this, as I recollect, the intention presently is to roll over the contract, and that the future contract for waste will not come up for consideration until sometime late in the fourth quarter of the current financial year, or early in the 24-25 financial year. And a decision as to whether that is actually added to the current work plan should be deferred until that information is more fully developed. There are then the other item. Sorry.
It was just a question
Hannah,
about the dental services.
Yes.
It says it's not to be scrutinized. Is that we wait until something happens, or do we just not do it? It's off our books.
No, it said that updates report to be shared with the scrutiny committee, and that will, and the intention is that will still happen in October 2023.
Okay, so the October is that they will bring it to us.
Yes, they will bring it to us, but the point I was making was that there had been an update previously at the health and wellbeing meeting at the end of June, which basically affirmed that the status in terms of progress remained unchanged from October 2022 as it was reported at that time. Yes. Sorry, just by way of clarification. So what was agreed is that the report will be circulated, but it will not be debated in October this year. Is that?
Yep, that's clear. Thank you.
Clear. We then come on to the early years sufficiency of and school place planning, and the current assessment of that is that scrutiny would have little to add by way of value to the process, and therefore it is not currently proposed that is included in the forward plan. The annual education performance review, which as members recognise primarily covers which covers the academised sector, is that there would be little that this committee could actually add by way of value by scrutinising that report, and therefore the present proposal is that is not included in the forward work plan. Similarly, we then come to the SACRA annual report, and again it is considered that scrutiny could not by its function add or make any influence or make any significant changes to that report, and therefore it's also considered. Councillor Carr.
Sorry, I might be being a bit silly here, but do they give any reasons why it's not adding value, why scrutiny wouldn't add value? It's just a comment and doesn't give an explanation?
Because we cannot actually change the report. So it can be provided for information to this committee, but we can't actually do anything to change it.
Okay, I mean, it might be just helpful for a line to say that it's a report and not.
Sorry,
Should
Democratic
just-
Services Manager.
I should just say, as thank you, Chair, I should just say we do have 2 elected councillors who sit on SACRE as well. And you, in terms of elected member oversight of what's happening with SACRE, and it may be that those members could be encouraged to share the annual report with Scrutiny and indeed all with other members as they see fit, without necessarily coming before this committee.
Is that acceptable? Thank you. The last item on the current schedule is safety on the highways, and as we have previously discussed, there has been significant work done by in the previous year on this issue, and the proposal is that this remain on the list. My understanding is that the satisfaction survey for the police services in the county will shortly be published, and we should consider that and consider this item at a later date. Councillor Beggy.
Sorry, Councillor Ross, as far as I'm aware, we didn't do any work on the highways last year. It never started.
I thought it was, I beg your pardon, I thought it was in relation to community speed watch, safety on the highways.
Within Scrutiny, we did no work on speed watch or highways. It was proposed, but never happened.
Oh, why? Right.
Councillor Beggy, sorry, has accurately summarised. It was a standing considered item, but it never progressed forward. But it was a standing item for consideration.
Thank you. I think in view of the fact that it was not on the agenda for some considerable time, and that shortly we will receive the satisfaction survey from the police for the past year, it is worthy of at least consideration by this committee when that report comes to hand. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a bit of clarification. There's a couple of items on here, leisure and customer, where clear expectations and timings and advice from CLT is actually required for input into Scrutiny in terms of how that might be useful for Scrutiny to deal with those items. Can we expect that on those items at the next meeting? Because I think we need that to actually go on to consider whether that is appropriate to add to the work plan and what the scope might be.
My understanding is that it is the intention that the issue of leisure is brought forward as a proposal. I do not know about the precise timing of that beyond the fact that the item will be considered by Cabinet. But in terms of actually actioning the item for this committee, we have not yet had a specific proposal that it be put to scrutiny. Councillor Payne.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, could we ask for more precise dates from the respective directors?
I believe that the date is, I'll look to Councillor Waller, is the 15th of August, that it comes before Cabinet.
I was going to say something. Yes, but there are a couple of issues on this. It depends entirely on what Scrutiny is interested in terms of leisure. If your interest is simply the centre at Catmos College and the outcome of the tendering exercise that we've gone through, then yes, your August date is correct as far as when Cabinet sees it. If your interest is wider and is about the medium to long-term provision of leisure services within Rutland, and you would wish to have a task and finish group, then clearly that isn't time limited by what's happening in August, because it's a longer, wider proposition. So that is entirely up to you, Chairman, and your committee.
Thank you. I believe that we still need to clarify what we wish to do with regard to leisure as a committee. And that is something that we will need to carry forward to the next meeting. Have you any comments? Anybody to make any comments on the subject? Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. I think my understanding kind of was that our main interest is in what happens with Catmos and consideration if options come forward that aren't zero cost, that we sort of examine them. I'm not sure I can speak for the whole committee, but I think that was my understanding that primarily that's what we want to look at in the future. And I think Scrutiny considered that quite important because there's clearly a lot of public feeling around that particular issue, which is why it came up in the first place.
Councillor Carr.
I do concur with that, but thanks, Chair. But I am wondering, are we now too late for the August meeting?
So yeah, the timelines are very tight. So we've just closed, well, we will close the commission process tomorrow. But it will take some time to then review all the applications, etc. And then hence we're aiming for an August cabinet. But I think what the leader's point is that whatever decision is taken around that is only one part of the jigsaw, and actually the future of leisure long term is an important aspect that you might want to consider. But clearly, there are other ways of engaging as well in the decision making around cabinet.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions, Councillor Beggy?
Yes, on leisure, I agree with Stephen and Tracy. I think there is two threats to this. There's the short-term outcome of the tendering process, and I suppose my question through you, Chair, to the portfolio holder is, if we scrutinise the outcome of this, which effectively will be, well, we come to September meeting, decide if we want to do it, so therefore October before we actually do it. Actually, can we add any value to that process? Have we missed the boat? And my second point is, I think we need to do both exercise long term, which is the task and finish group possibly, but the short term, we are here for residents to put our point of view across about the short term outcome of the leisure contract. That's why maybe October is far too late.
Sorry, Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chairman. As portfolio holder for this area, as the Chief Exec has indicated, the timescale is very tight. Those who were on this council prior to me will be aware that the tender documentation had more flexibility in it than previously, and we weren't just asking for nil cost. Clearly, if all we get back is a lot of money for the council, decisions have to be made. But if any of you individually want to, after reading the cabinet papers when they are published, make any comments to cabinet, those of you who were watching yesterday's cabinet will realise that we do reflect them in our discussion on the day. So you will have a chance to feed through. We will read them, we will take them seriously, and we will address them in the cabinet meeting. I do appreciate, having sat where you're all sitting now, that doesn't sound satisfactory, that you want the opportunity to discuss it. But we are constrained by time, because you'll appreciate this has already been delayed once and need a decision. Final decision needs to be made, but it won't be the end of discussions around sport and leisure in Rutland, as Councillor Beggy picked up from what I said earlier. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I just reinforce the comments that have been made by Councillors Lambert and Beggy? it's a matter of considerable concern to many constituents. What happens about the future of Catmos. So I therefore think that we should follow the advice that you have, or the suggestion that you have made, the offer you have made, that we consider putting forward a comments to Cabinet for considerations specifically. Councillor Carr.
I think it's a tricky one. Thanks, Chair. I think it's a tricky one because there's so many unknowns. We could have amazing tenders that come in that are very competitive, very effective, efficient, tick all the boxes. And I guess we can't preempt what may have happened previously because there wasn't any flexibility within the tender spec. So I think that's why there's a bit of difficulty, and probably I've been slow on the mark because we don't know how many have been submitted. So it could be 1, it could be 10, and some of which can be quite competitive and meet all the criteria. But it's really hard, and I don't know when we will know the outcome of what's been, who's tendered, what they've submitted, and which options are viable and not. So I think it does put us in a bit of a tricky position, but that's my opinion.
I think my suggestion would be that we should place on record the concerns of, or otherwise, of our constituents with the situation that emerged previously around the placement of the contract, or not non-placement of the contract. And I also think that the provision of services at Catmos needs to be seen in the wider ambit in terms of health and well-being of our community. And it's not simply about leisure. It needs to be seen in that wider context. So my suggestion is that we consider putting a note to Cabinet, setting out the issues as we see them, simply to inform Cabinet, and recognising that the no tenders have as yet been received, but that these points that we have made, as Councillor Waller has referred to, are considered as and when these tenders are submitted. I think, yes.
Sorry, could I just do a point of information? As far as I am aware, tenders have been received. It's just they don't close till tomorrow, so we don't know how many.
Okay. So I still repeat the comment that I made with regard to the assessment of tenders, but there will be criteria, I presume, that will be set forward for the assessment of those tenders, and we can place on record our views on the matter. So.
Yes, my point was based on that, was kind of, if there are, but I think we need to put something out to people to say that we're doing something, because for the vast majority of our residents, they think we're sitting on our laurels and doing nothing, and we're not doing nothing. But the timescale that you described, when you're talking it's going to be August, then September, then October, the people out there are just seeing a bunch of people doing nothing. So I think that, sorry, thank you, Chair. I was just more getting something out.
No, it's actually Councillor Beggy was next to have his hand up.
Just a quick one. This is obviously a very contentious and important issue. What's stopping us having a one agenda item meeting prior to Cabinet?
There's nothing to stop us having that. If that's the view of the committee, there is no reason that we can't do that. Sorry, Chief Executive.
I was So I can't preempt in terms of numbers because the systems are locked, right? But we have had bids in. But I wanted just to give you my perspective of the current state of the market and maybe some of the risks, because it may mitigate some people's fears, I think. We do have a situation where we've put a range of different scenarios to the market. One of those is nil cost to authority, ranging up to a shared risk. The indications around the market, and I'm not suggesting that we've seen any of the bids at all, but the indication from the market across the country is that people are uneasy about taking on the full risk of utilities. So it is likely at some point we will have to consider what we do about risk of utilities. The other side, I would say, to it in terms of the risk to the authority is some of the very difficult situation about utilities costs have resolved themselves nationally as well. So the question may come is that there may be some form of risk share that we may need to enter into at some point around a provision such as leisure. But the question is that may end up being not actually a significant financial risk to the council, although what it is sharing the potential risk if another incident occurred like the one we saw in Ukraine. So in that sense, I'm thinking, it's probably a more measured situation that we currently find ourselves in trying to let the contract around leisure. If that hopefully helps you think about, how you might want to act and what potentially might come out. That said, I can't preempt what we have had through, and I can't preempt what the decision that Cabinet may or may not take on it. But I thought it might be helpful just to sort of talk about my view on risk.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful. I think as a committee, could we return to the proposition that Councillor Beggy made, that we have a one-off meeting to discuss this issue, and could we have a show of hands for that proposition? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you.
It may be useful, Chair, just to.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add
Yes,
one
please.
small caveat
Please.
around that? Is we just need to make sure that there is sufficient time for us to actually come to a conclusion on the review and publish papers in time for you to have a meeting before the Cabinet, which is 4 weeks away, which the papers for that need to be published a week in advance. So I understand what the committee would like to do. I just need to make sure that it's absolutely feasible for us to be able to do that review, publish papers in advance of the agenda for whatever meeting you'll put in, which I'm not convinced it would be, but we will take it away and have a look at and come back to the committee.
Thank you. We now come to item 11 on the agenda, election of representatives. We need to appoint a substitute representative for the Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland Joint Health Scrutiny Committee. This committee meets 3 times per year in Leicester, typically in the morning. The next meeting will be held on Monday, the 18th of September. That just goes to prove how wrong I was, between 2 and 5 p.m. at County Hall. I am on holiday at that time, and the reason that this is important is that Councillor Stevenson has recently also taken up a full-time role, and therefore her ability to fulfil this role is much more limited than it was when she was proposed for the role of vice chair. So could I ask if anybody is prepared to take on the role of substitute representative for these meetings. Thank you. No interest. Right.
Chair, could I?
Councillor Carr, are you prepared to?
Well, I'm not, I haven't got my work diary with me. But
Subject to that.
pending, subject to that and subject to being, because I do work flexibly, I will consider it. But I will let you know if that's okay.
Yes,
As soon as I possibly can.
thank you very much indeed for that.
Chair, I think it'd be given that Councillor Carr is the volunteer, I think it'd be important for you to take a vote and formally agree that Councillor Carr is the substitute, because if Councillor Carr isn't available, then there's no volunteers anyway, but it's important for you to have agreed that substitute so that you've got that option available.
So can we have a vote on the nomination of Councillor Carr as the substitute representative for the LLR? I'm assuming that you're nominating yourself procedurally, and will Councillor Powell second you? Yes,
I'm happy to nominate Councillor Carr as a substitute.
thank you. Could we have a show of hands? Duly elected. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay. Subject to confirmation of her availability. Councillor Johnson, could I just ask before we start on item 12, we're perfectly happy to reschedule items 12 and 13, because I appreciate that you just come through the door. Would you like some time and we can move to item 14?
If you can give me a few minutes, that would be useful just to reorient myself. Thank you, Chair.
By all means. Sorry, I apparently need to take a vote to agree to defer these two items, that's items 12 and 13, for consideration later in the meeting, and the proposal is that we move to item 14. Can I have a show of hands with regard to that proposal to defer to later in the meeting items 12 and 13? All those in favour?
Councillor Powell. Sorry, I'm happy to either propose it or second it if you're proposing it, and then I'll vote in favour. Is that okay?
Thank you. I'm still getting to grips with these tech procedures. All those in favour? Any against? No abstentions. Thank you. Group and panel updates. And we now have the updates regarding the committee's task and finish groups. And first we have the economic strategy task and finish group. The papers are included The group met on the 26th of June to review Rutland's economic development strategy before it was presented to Cabinet on the 15th of August. Councillor Brown is unable to attend tonight's meeting, but the notes from the meeting have been distributed with the agenda pack and include the group's summary of the recommended amendments to the final economic development strategy. The final version of the economic development strategy, together with the industrial property plan from the consultants Iceni, will be available to the group on the 24th of July. And it's proposed that a further meeting of the Economic Strategy Task and Finish Group will be held post the 24th of July to meet the requirement to submit the final recommendations in time for the Cabinet meeting on the 15th of August. Would other members of the Task and Finish Group like to add anything to what I've just said?
No, thank you, Chair. I think the notes are quite comprehensive and reflect well what we discussed.
Thank you. So the Councillor Powell, I do beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry if I'm not quite following this. So are we making specific recommendations from scrutiny? What is the status in terms of, you say it's been developed and talked obviously to Cabinet about it, but are we required to make a formal recommendation from this committee?
Yes, we are, from the Task and Finish Group.
On those summary points?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did I switch my microphone? Yes. Are there any questions at all on the papers as presented in the pack? Okay. Thank you. And sorry, Councillor Powell.
Yeah, just to say that I think the Economic Development Task and Finish Group has done a really comprehensive job and done what we need to be doing in scrutiny, working with officers and portfolio holders to actually develop an input into strategies and really looking at what added value that scrutiny can input to these processes. And I think it's a very, over a period of time has actually achieved that and has come up with some really hopefully useful recommendations. So thank you to the members of the group.
Thank you. So the motion is that the committee approves the summary of the recommended amendments to the economic development strategy as detailed from the meeting of the Economic Task and Finish Group held on the 26th of June 2023. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Oh, the motion is that the committee approve, I beg your pardon, the motion is that the committee approves the summary of the recommended amendments to the economic development strategy as detailed from the meeting of the Economic Strategy Task and Finish Group held on the 26th of June, albeit this is a work in progress.
And so, Chairman, do you have a proposer and seconder that the comments so far be sent to the Cabinet, given that the committee won't be formally meeting again before Cabinet considers the matter in August?
The intention is that a meeting will be held prior to post.
As in a meeting of this committee?
No, it will not. That's good. Sorry.
And so, as per our procedure rules, reports from Task and Finish groups should come to this committee first. So our recommendation would be that you take a proposal and seconder and vote that the comments made so far be passed to the Cabinet as part of their considerations. And that if there are any further comments arising from future work that you've spoken about with regard to the Economic Strategy Task and Finish group, that those be passed directly to the Cabinet. But for the comments that you have received so far on your agenda tonight, that the committee formally propose and decide that those go to Cabinet.
Right. So the motion is that the committee approves the summary of the recommended amendments, which, just for the sake of good order, are 7 in number. And I'll just briefly read through those. That the county of Northamptonshire should be included as one of Rutland's neighbouring authority, as well as Nottinghamshire, Greater Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Cambridgeshire. Secondly, that the strategy should include a statement communicating Rutland's unique selling point and identifying why businesses should locate in Rutland and what the benefits would be from such location. 3, that the strategy needed to identify what companies were actually looking for when they were thinking about locating their business to a particular location or county. So the basis upon which businesses would locate to the county is item 3. Item 4, that explanations within the strategy should be less technical so that the information would be more easily understood by Cabinet and the general public. 5, Rutland County Council's role in the delivery of the economic development strategy needs to be identified. And 6, the phrase what could Rutland's economy look like in 2040 should be amended to state what should Rutland's economy look like in 2040. And 7, the strategy should identify Rutland County Council as an exemplar for other areas as a sustainable rural economy. So that is a summary of the recommendations that were made. So based upon those summary recommendations, the motion is that the committee approves the summary of these recommended amendments to the economic development strategy as detailed from the meeting of the task and economic strategy task and finish group held on the 26th of June 2023. All those in favour, please raise your hands. No, have I missed this again? Can I have a proposer? And thank you, Councillor Payne, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Powell. All those in favour? There's nobody against, and there are no abstentions. Therefore, it's resolved that the committee approves the summary of the recommended amendments to the economic development strategy as detailed in the notes from the meeting of the economic strategy task and finish group held on the 26th of June 2023. That brings us to item B on the agenda, the asset review task and finish group terms of reference. And we have now had the draft terms of reference for the asset review task and finish group for finalisation and approval. Penny Sharp, Strategic Director for Places, and Mona Walsh, Head of Property Services, with the assistance of the Scrutiny Officer, have drafted the proposed terms of reference for the task and finish group, which are included in your pack. The objective of the group will be to comment to Cabinet on the proposed option for each of the 7 key assets and identify any opportunities, risks, or issues. I will say now that I am supportive of this work. I'll make one observation with regard to timing of this coming here and the timing of the programme of work. Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions regarding the terms of reference? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really key area that Scrutiny needs to look at, and look at how Scrutiny's review of it can actually add value to the challenging decisions that the council is going to have to make, which forms part of our overall strategy and transformation going forward. I just comment on, to me, it seems there perhaps needs to be a 2-stage approach, because the purpose is to scrutinise the recommended options for the 7 key assets. I know there'll be a lot of work done by officers and by consultants on those key options. I think it would there needs to be, and timing is a different thing, needs to be timing built in to see what those recommendations are. And then I think scrutiny really needs to look at those papers to see what added value it can give. I think to just comment on the options, I'm not sure that that really is going deep enough into it. And I'm wondering whether that's the first stage and there is a further scoping meeting with the group, with officers, to actually really drill into what would be the most beneficial outcome and scope of that, of the group. I mean, I'm sort of happy with this as a first stage, but I feel it needs a bit more. It really needs more meat on the bones, especially this will be something that impacts residents, impacts services, forms part of the wider picture. And I really think we do need to look at it, but we do need to look at it properly. And it maybe needs that two-stage approach.
Thank you. And I'll make a comment on that after we've heard from Councillor Beggy, who had his raised his hand.
Thank you, Chair. I may be agreeing with Rosemary, but I'm not quite sure. It's about the part the group will not scrutinise the work done to date. I think it's very difficult to look at the 7 key recommendations without actually understanding the data and the work that goes behind it. I think the understanding of how you got from A to B is just important as the destination. So I don't think the main role is necessarily to comment too much on the methodology, but I think we need to understand the methodology and the data outputs in order to make an informed decision and to identify potentially there's any holes in that data.
Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I was just going to add, as that part of that, I was thinking there may be questions arising from those options and business cases that need to be answered before we can go on to the next stage. Sorry, that was just an addition.
Thank you.
Sorry, me, Chair. Thank you. I should just say the timings as per the terms of reference of what officers have advised is practical because, as you say, Councillor Powell, it's important to make sure you've got the options in front of you. And 5th of September was identified as the best time as soon as practicable for them to be made available to you. I suggest that you may want to consider approving the terms of reference, but subject to a scoping meeting taking place in August. And that could be an opportunity to make sure that you have the relevant background information before doing the substantive work at the 2 meeting dates proposed. As was advised by officers when we first put this idea together, there are a lot of tight timelines on this, and much earlier than September would make it very difficult for scrutiny to have the information, the substantive recommendations in place.
Thank you, Chair. And following our pre-meet, I can confirm I have spoken with Mona Walsh and Penny Sharp, and they have confirmed that yes, the papers that you need will be available in time for you to read before you have your first meeting of the task and finish group, but that deadline for the cabinet meeting cannot be altered.
Could I just sorry, I do recognise Councillor Powell, just by way of clarification, I think we need to understand exactly when the documentation, and that it is reasonable when it will be available. There is no point that it arrives 48 hours before the meeting. That would not be acceptable. Councillor Powell.
I was just going to make that point just for clarification. Does that mean the documentation will be available on the 5th of September?
I have been assured that the documentation will be available before the meeting.
Sorry, Chair, but any meaningful conversation on the 5th of September needs to have given task and finish group members adequate time to look through the documentation and at least have an initial view of what's in it. Thank you.
Could I ask the Chief Executive would like to make a comment?
So I was just going to suggest that we take away your comments and we amend the timeline to include the lead-in time for documents being available. So you're aware of that. The second thing I was going to say is because it's an all council decision eventually, there's going to be a need to play in all councillors. I think the point you were making around needing to understand the broad agenda first, have the documentation, but a broad agenda that then work out your scope as scrutiny might be a useful opportunity for us to work with all members on that first part and then scrutinize beyond that. So at least then all members have the right information at the same time about a decision they may be taking, and then scrutiny can then delve a bit deeper and make some recommendations about to cabinet ahead of the decision that will eventually be taken by all councillors. So it's just to also remind you that this isn't a cabinet decision solely, it's a whole council decision, so you'll be making the decision. So ultimately the recommendations of any change will come back to yourself.
Thank you for that. I think that was a very helpful contribution. Are there any further comments that people wish to make on this subject? Councillor Powell.
So just to be clear then, you're going to come back to and sort of think of that timeline in terms of how that will work with all members and scrutiny reviewing and feeding in and task and finish groups. I think scrutiny does need to look at it specifically, but the timeline for scrutiny doing that sort of extra bit, which may involve some, you know, other engagement and cross-checking and things in the course of that procedure. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm hearing from you. What we'll do is we'll go away and obviously I'm going on leave tonight, but others will take that forward in terms of getting a timeline to make sure, because the timelines are tight, to make sure that you get the proper lead in, that there's a meeting with all members, there's an opportunity to finalise your scope, and then have a series of meetings ahead of the cabinet meeting. It's going to be tight. There's going to be some hard work for you to do if that's what you want to do. But none of this has to take place in a formal meeting anyway, because a lot of it is commercially sensitive in terms of the future of assets. So there's plenty of flexibility.
If there are no further questions, could we turn to the issue of whether we have any person that would be prepared to chair this particular task and finish group? Councillor Payne.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Powell, please.
Yes, I'm happy to chair it as long as the timeline
Seconder.
are revised.
Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. There is then the role of vice chair, and I am happy to put my name forward for the role of vice chair. I must make clear, however, that I am not available for the first meeting because I will be on holiday. So please consider that before deciding on that particular offer. Councillor Becky. I beg your pardon.
Sorry, I haven't had a chance to speak beforehand, but given that you may be difficulty to make those meetings, and given the fact that it is a very, very tight program and it's a very important program, I think having realistic timescales and dates and times is really, really important. And I'd like to nominate Councillor Payne as the vice chair.
I'm happy to accept, Chair. Thanks.
Seconder. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. I can also advise. Are there any other members who would wish to be part of the group? Councillor Beggy, Councillor Lambert. Do we need could we have a proposer and a seconder for Councillor Beggy and Councillor Lambert?
Sorry, Chair, and Councillor Harvey as well.
And Councillor Harvey as well. Thank you. Okay, so can we take a vote on those three councillors? All those in favour?
Sorry, can I,
Yep.
Councillor Ross, are you also on coming on the task and finish group at all?
I think I'm
No.
surplus to the requirement.
No, no.
Because I'm not there for the first meeting. I'm perfectly happy to be part of the committee, but I think if we've got Samantha, if we've got Councillor Harvey, I do beg your pardon, Councillor Lambert, and I'm struggling to remember who else was the Councillor Beggy. I think we only require. We've got the minimum. We actually have the minimum, so therefore I'm surplus to requirements. Yes, thank you. We seem to have the requisite numbers. All those in favour of councillors Beggy, Harvey, Lambert, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? Any against? Thank you. I think we'll now return to item 12 on the agenda, which is the corporate performance annual progress report for 2022-23. And we now have the report number 106-2023 from Councillor Andrew Johnson, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Resources. Councillor Johnson, would you please brief the committee on your report? This is item 12.
Right. I apologise, Chair. I apologise for arriving late for the meeting. I was chairing a parish council meeting where I couldn't change the date. So in terms of the corporate performance report, I obviously referred to this at council on Monday. I think the report is a good report. I've challenged various items of evidence on it, and I've been given evidence which backs up the data, which was important to me. I think the council noted the performance report on Monday, which was what was requested. What I'd like to do here is respond, if you would like me to the questions that have been asked on these items.
Please.
Yep. Good. Okay, thank you. I'm learning about scrutiny. I apologise if
so am I.
If the L plates are still on. I had a whole series of questions, I think totaling 19 about the report. I've been given responses by the officers, and I've just been checking through those responses. So would you like me to go through those responses in turn?
No, I don't think that's necessary. They will be appended to the minutes.
Good.
Are there any further questions? I believe that those responses were in connection with written submissions. Yes. Are there any questions that other members of the committee would like to raise with you at this time? Nobody. No. Councillor Beggy.
We've got a question, so to speak. It's more of an observation, really. And I've been banging on this for about 7 years now. Is the thing with these reports is they don't show a direction of travel. They show a snapshot of where we are now, but that doesn't tell me if that's an improving trend or a decreasing trend. And some of you be very bored of me asking for this, but it does in my world of data and statistics, trends are just as important as the absolutes. So that's just my comment for the future.
Do you wish me to reply?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Beggy. Yes, obviously, I've inherited this report, which is an easy explanation. But I think this was shown to me within a couple of weeks of the election, first of all. So I didn't have much chance to change anything at all. So prior to next year's report, I would like to get some ideas from all councillors as to how things might be improved on this report. If we can, I would like to incorporate ideas. Obviously, I think it's down to the officers also in terms of it's their report largely that allows them to project what they feel is important about the council. So I would like to make sure we have a joint effort at improving the report next year.
Thank you. I think the head of corporate services would like to make some comments.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the points just raised, just to note, this is the first annual report for the new corporate strategy. So for the first year, as we move into next year, obviously we'll be in a better position to show trends. But just to note, this report doesn't replace the quarterly performance report that members will receive and Cabinet will also receive, which will give more detail on trends in terms of quarter-on-quarter position. And as I outlined the other day in a briefing to members, we are also working on the presentation of our data moving forward and using better visuals to enable you to see trends and therefore be in a better position to comment. So point noted, and it's something we are working on.
Thank you. Could I just make one comment on this particular report? It's really about the audience it is actually addressed to and the usability of the information as it's presented. And I think in terms of messaging, it's something that we might consider going forward. Are there any other comments? No, if there are no other comments, then thank you. Sorry, Chief, beg your pardon, I missed you.
I just think I'd like to say, I guess, that, and I think I mentioned a little bit of this in one of the briefings, but there's a lot of positives in this report in terms of our council outcomes. I would have hoped that the committee might have highlighted a few of those and areas that you might have wanted to look at in terms of strengths of the council that we might want to build on. There is national government reporting. We enter the top quartile on many of those measures. Offlog, the new Office of Local Government, which is now looking at scrutinising best value of councils, has published its first set of data, and we come out extraordinarily well compared to other councils in a very challenging context. Part of the issues in this report are around things around workforce retention, the skills within the sector. I think it's helpful if we, as well as looking at areas that we want to improve and build on, we also recognise positive successes that we have as a council that you represent. Just something for you to consider for the future.
And could I just respond to those comments? I agree that there are many positives, and the reason for making the comment that I made earlier is about the public messaging, and I think there are many highlights in the report that could be usefully presented to our residents. One of the examples being the monies expended on infrastructure as but one example. So if my comment on messaging was taking as being in any way a general criticism, that was not intended. There are many positives. I think I'll leave my comments at that. So, Councillor Beggy, I beg you.
Mark, yes, apologies, we didn't pass bring up the positives. So maybe a lot of those we did ask questions in advance, but you're quite right. And just to pick up on what Councillor Ross said, I think there is an enormously positive communications programme that can come off the back of this. Again, my day job, but a series of social media, not just telling people about this consultation or that, but just snapshots by the day of the week of positive information. So the community can begin to see actually some of the good work we're doing. I don't think we, all the council, shout loud enough and in the right channels enough. And I think that's a huge opportunity for all of us.
Yes.
Yeah,
Chief
sorry,
Executive.
thank you. That's really helpful. And one of the questions I guess I have is that, and maybe it flows from what Councillor Johnson was saying at the beginning, which is there is this sort of feeling of a lack of belief in what we do say when we say it anyway. And I just sort of wondered whether the committee had any ideas about how we might tackle that collectively in terms of challenging the message and making sure that those messages land home. And we saw a bit of it in council in terms of satisfaction in particular services. So it'd just be useful, because obviously it's one thing to give the message, another thing to have it believed and land. So I'm open to recommendations and suggestions.
But the offer's there every day, Mark. My day job is marketing and communications and messaging. If anybody wants to talk or run ideas past me, just pick up the phone. That's what I've been doing for 20 odd years.
Councillor Edwards, I think was next.
Yeah, it was more about that. How do we make ourselves look better when I'm scrolling through all of this and it's almost all good, but people don't see that. People see the bad. So what we need to do is look at the bits that are really annoying people and get those bits up a bit. So whether that's a face behind a desk or one tiny thing will make somebody go, oh, hey, that wasn't terrible. It seems to be that sorry, I'm just waffling. It just seems that we're so close to being really good in so many bits. That
Sorry, can you just repeat the last point?
I said we're so close to being so good in all of the bits that we just need to boost the people into remembering that those bits are good, because people otherwise only remember the bad. And I don't know how we do that. I'm sorry, that was kind of useless. Thank you, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you. Could we just the Chief Executive?
Yeah, no, it is actually a really good point, because I think what you're referring to is that there are some areas that have high impact in terms of reputation that are creating a negativity around aspects of the council, which means the rest of our messages don't land. And we need to focus our energies on learning from the areas that are good, but focus on particularly those key areas that will make that difference. I think we've got one or two in mind. So thank you. That's really helpful that you've confirmed that. That's really good.
Councillor Lambert.
In terms of like thinking of ways of cutting through and making it known good work the council does, I think sort of that you could put numbers and figures on the Facebook page and speak about them constantly and no one will believe it. If you could say 99% of roads are gritted at winter, people still talk about the one that wasn't. But I think seeing a picture of Rosemary Powell out with the gritters on Facebook makes a big difference, because it's sort of, but I think that was that on Facebook? I think I remember it stuck in my head. There was a picture, we're seeing that, you remember it and you think the councils are out doing things. It cuts through compared to figures, and I think that's where perhaps you can cut through to people actually seeing good work. And I think councils are perhaps better placed to do that on their own social media, saying the council, we reported this and the council did something about it, rather than the council just posting figures. But I do think it comes down to case studies and sort of going for people's feelings rather than bombarding them with figures and saying we've done 99% of this, but because people will just talk about the bad things otherwise.
Councillor Carr.
Is it time to bring sort of lived experience more into the arena, into this? And when I say lived experience, people who are on the receiving end. I had a very useful meeting yesterday as the children's champion for looked after children, and the two best speakers was somebody who was in foster care and one of the foster carers. So I think we've got to start bringing our residents in. So because with the best will in the world, and I do post things on social media around things that are going on, but there's still this big aspect of apathy and a little bit of mistrust. And I think the way perhaps we can reach the audience that we want to reach in a way we want to reach them is by bringing in lived experiences. But that's my, thank you, Chair.
Would it be helpful to the executive if we were to summarize the points that have there are many positives in the report, that in terms of the issues that arise as reflected in the discussion on the doorstep, that we have, in my opinion, possibly underplayed. Would it be helpful if we tried to collate those and submitted those for consideration?
Yes, yeah, that would be helpful, and we'll make sure we take up Councillor Beggy's offer as well. And the discussion today has been really helpful. Certainly the lived experience, who is saying the message, I think is really important, and those who've received the good service as opposed to those who are delivering it, I think has a real sort of strength to it going forward. So we'll take that away. Thank you. It's been really helpful.
Thanks. Councillor Waller.
Thank you. I've been listening with interest, and those of you who've known me for a long time know that I'm more a glass half empty than glass half full sort of person. But one of the delights of yesterday was being in the museum at the staff awards, and I was also involved, as were my colleague cabinet members, with judging who was going to be the winner this year. But an awful lot of the people who were nominated for staff awards, all of whom were nominated for going above and beyond in different aspects, I think some of what they were doing is well worthy of the case studies as well. I don't think it's just our residents, and I do take the point, the lived experience, absolutely. But also I think people don't realise what our staff do. And I'm sure you've all had the same comment that I've had since people have been working in a hybrid way. Oh, well, they're being paid for 5 days a week and they're sitting at home doing nothing for 3 of them. Now, we all know that isn't true. Far from it. All our staff work more hours than they're meant to work. Just because they're not working in this building doesn't mean they're not working. But I think it would be helpful actually to highlight for members as much as anybody else what staff's colleagues are saying about them, because it is their colleagues who are recommending them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Beggy.
Just one final point. It's not always what you're saying, it's how you're saying. We talk and market ourselves like a council. That may sound strange, but that's not how our consumers see us. We need to see ourselves as a consumer-facing business, and look how modern businesses market themselves, the channel they use and how they communicate. It's not static case studies and pen portraits. You've got to really understand who that consumer is and talk to them as they want to be, not like we do in quite an old-fashioned way.
Councillor Johnson first. Then.
Thank you, Chair. Now I've got my brain in gear. I apologise for being a bit mixed up earlier. I think one of the issues with the report, and it's a good report as it stands, and I think we should celebrate some of the achievements in it. But I think what's being said is that it's trying to appeal to too many different audiences at the same time. I think we need to reflect that we're trying to communicate with our own staff, we're trying to communicate with our residents, and we're also trying to reflect government and other statistics that are important to us overall in terms of performance measurement. But I think the effort probably needs to go into deciding who is the audience and how do we want to present it, which I know is a bit motherhood, but I think the audience is so important. And I do think it's a bit mixed here in terms of who the audience is aimed at.
Thank you. Councillor Will.
Thanks. I agree in part in what you've just said, Andrew, but I also think it's every one of our jobs to make sure the message goes out to the people. All of us have, you know, several different parish councils that we're sitting up before. And I think the way to really push our message over is to remind people of the troubles that we have had over the last 3 years with pandemics, with a war in Ukraine, with Brexit. There's a hell of a lot going on outside the country, and we've also got people inside the country in central government shooting themselves in the foot, left, right and centre. I think what our people really like to hear is honest comment about it and explain, you know, if money is tight, we're getting around to it and we'll do it as soon as possible. But what they want is a responsive system. If you can get a responsive answer out quickly, even if it's a holding reply, but it's an honest one, then people will understand and they will realize that, you know, life is not that bad.
Thank you for that contribution, and I think all of those sentiments are valuable. Unless there are any other questions, I'd like to draw this discussion to a close. And so the motion is that the committee notes the contents of the annual report and the performance of the council over the last year as set out in report number 87/2023. I require a proposer and a seconder, a proposer. Thank you, Councillor Lambert, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Maggie. All those in favour? There are no abstentions and there are no votes against. So it is resolved that the committee notes the contents of the annual report and the performance of the council over the last year as set out in report number 87/2023. And that brings us to item number 13 on the agenda, the financial outturn position for 2022-23, I beg your pardon. And we now have report number 107/2023 from Councillor Andrew Johnson, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Resources. Councillor Johnson, would you please brief the committee on your report? My mistake. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. It is Kirsty Nutton, Strategic Director for Resources, who will present the financial outturn position. Thank you for that correction.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you contains the final position for the 22-23 finances for the council. The executive summary provides the main overview for the contents of the report. And so briefly, it shows the overall underspend of 0.4 million, which mainly relates to income that's been received in advance of service activity being undertaken. This is in the context of additional reserves that were applied during the year in terms of dealing with and mitigating the additional pressures brought on from inflation that we're seeing due to the economic turmoil that we experienced during the last year. There are some overspends and pressures that were reported within the People's Directorate, which relate to increases in demand for home care, and some use of home to school transport relating to special educational needs as well, creating pressures. There were also offsetting underspend areas relating to staff vacancies as well, and the difficulties in recruitment. The one piece of good news as well, amongst other, was that due to the economic turmoil experienced, we were able to benefit from increased interest income on our cash balances as well, which helped offset the overall position. With regards to the capital programme, the expenditure for the year was 7.1 million, and there was works completed with regards to highways work and also the digital Rutland scheme, providing the superfast broadband for the county. Work continues on the special educational needs. The council does have a deficit, but the increase where expenditure is exceeding the funding available was restricted to a large degree compared to previous years due to the actions taken by the council, and therefore, although there was an increase to the deficit, it was limited in its scope. So that is my brief overview and introduction to the report.
Thank you. And now, are there any questions? Before we do, I must say, as a lapsed accountant, I thought it was extremely well presented. Are there any questions? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, and then there are some points of detail which I'm quite happy are answered afterwards. Yeah, thank you. So the financial risk that we have is the highest risk on RCC strategic risk register. And I think risk management should run through everything we do. And one of the mitigating actions to manage this risk, the financial risk, was the council's approval of the financial sustainability strategy. So I'd like to ask the portfolio holder and section 151 officer how we can evidence we are delivering against this strategy and making progress against the baseline we set in November 22.
Thank you, Chair and Councillor Payne. Indeed, so when these figures were put together, one of the aspects that I certainly challenged the finance team and CLT were, what does that mean? What do these results mean in terms of the future? So there is a section within the report that considers the impact of the results on the medium-term financial strategy and what we assumed in there. And also in Appendix B, where the variants are detailed, there is a column there that recognises is this an impact on our future and therefore on our current strategy. And you'll see that I think there are very few cases, but the majority, where there were pressures experienced, that was recognised, and the budget and the future budgets had been recognised as well. There was nothing in this outturn report that causes me to change the assumptions used in the financial sustainability strategy.
Welcome back.
Councillor Payne.
Yeah, the financial sustainability strategy was about the medium-term financial plan, but it was also about how we made the council more effective and made it smaller. And I think it's all of those things that make up that strategy, and there isn't any comment around that. It's just about the figures. So I'm asking for a comment about the financial sustainability strategy, not just the medium-term financial plan. Yeah.
Yeah, so the financial sustainability strategy, we talked about that we would set ourselves a maximum limit of £2 million in terms of underwriting while we move through the transformation programme. So we're coming to the final stages of just working with Cabinet to get agreement on the way forward. It's on the agenda for my meeting with the leaders of the opposition ahead of the briefing that we want to put in for September. And there'll be a strategy around reserves coming to the September council. In terms of general impact of what that is looking like, so far our estimates are we will be well under the 2 million for the first year, but we will be in excess of 1.5, I think about 1.8. But we beat our MTFS target for the following year in our anticipation by some way. So what we're trying to do is to front load the programme, which means that we will barely use therefore reserves in those following years, and therefore only over the lifetime of the MTFS, if the transformation is delivered as we are estimating, we will only be using around 2.8, I think, million pounds overall, which is a much better position than where we were before. There is still a lot of uncertainty in terms of the government's position. There is, I was in a meeting with DLUC around local government financing and asked some questions around some of the potential promises of the rollover of the budget that we just had, because obviously that's important to us. As far as they can, they have made as much public already, and they hope that that will hold ministers to setting that in next year's budget. So it is reliant on next year's budget being as we expect. But because of that uncertainty is why we've tried to bring as much forward into that those first 2 years, so that we bite off as much of that savings target that we set ourselves in those first 2 years.
So my point really was that, you know, where were we making those? You've made those statements verbally, but it would be really helpful if they were made in the outturn report as well. Because we've got a strategy and we should comment on the strategy.
Yeah, no, I do take your point. This is an outturn report of last year, and we haven't agreed with Cabinet the programme going forward. But I do take your point that in future, once that programme is agreed, that will be integrated into all financial reporting. And the quarterly reports that you've asked to take here will obviously have a keen eye on our delivery of those programmes quarter to quarter.
It's managing the risk.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
And that being visible. Thank you.
Understood.
And then my second question is around Appendix D. I'm pleased that we put an innovation reserve, an innovation fund in there. It's quite a big reserve. It's 2.5 million. And my question is, because it is a general fund reserve and therefore council taxpayers' money, how does the portfolio holder, Section 151 officer, propose to ensure that the council taxpayers can see a demonstrable return on that investment, i.e. that the money's not just going to be handed out, that we're getting something back for it?
I'm happy to answer that. I think we're working on a process, and I have got experience personally in making cost-saving schemes happen and making sure that people get value for money. So the programme that we need to work on will yield the plan, but as at now, we couldn't say it's in a granular enough form to give you line by line. But we are working on it, and we know that we need to make sure it happens.
Yeah, that's good. It's just, you know, so that council taxpayers can see what's coming back.
No, absolutely.
When are we likely to have something?
I think what will happen as the year goes through and we do quarterly reports as we move through, I think some of those things will become more clear. And I think part of what we need to do is demonstrate that council taxpayers are getting value for money.
Yes, please.
In addition to that, as well, as I've alluded to in the report, in order to strengthen our financial management as well, there is a reserve strategy plan to come through to Cabinet and Council, and the use will be included within that strategy. So, you know, and ultimately follow the Council's financial procedure rules as well.
When's that likely to be delivered? Sorry, Chair.
No, please.
September for all Council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. The other questions, points of detail. Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Becky.
Thank you. My question, I can hear Gordon in my head when I'm saying this. Over the bit free you, Kirsty, Gordon and then now me taking up his mantle, we're very frustrated by the budget, how we would budget and then having massive surpluses at the end of each period, which is in many ways just as difficult to manage and see through as the deficits, and particularly since you've got 3 directorships which are a long way off their budget. Do you feel you are now in a better position to have a smoother budgeting process where we won't see these massive variances to budget each quarter, particularly with surpluses where we are saying we're going to be losing X, but we end up actually making Y?
Thank you for the question. Am I confident? There is a phrase in accountancy: as soon as you set a budget, it will change because of the assumptions based on it. I'm confident in terms of I've introduced since coming here, and we're in the process of an enhanced budget setting process. It's clear from this report and our use of reserves to underpin our everyday today expenditure. We cannot afford to do the things the way we're doing them. So the process that we're going to focuses on the cash available and the design of services to fit within that funding stream. So there are changes afoot. We recognise that transformation is needed and some investment is required in order to make ourselves sustainable as well. So that's where I'm obtaining my confidence, and any savings proposals will come through and be debated as council operates and does business as well.
Thank you. That's good, because when we're having difficult conversations about reducing service, it's a very difficult conversation when you're then reporting surpluses against the budget. The optic isn't great. So thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Yeah, it's just so a more layman's perspective, I guess, as a non-accountant and one who didn't pass his GCSE maths. So some of the issue I think me and Kirsty have been talking about is that, so we've agreed, for instance, where there are issues and pressures, and we've agreed reserves to go in. What's tended to happen is they've gone into the year, but we've also predicted that we're going to be fully staffed. And actually, and then what we've done is that we've put the reserves in, and then we haven't been fully staffed, and then we've put some of that money back, and it looks like we're underspent, when really we just, because of the pressures of staffing recruitment, we didn't need to necessarily draw down all those reserves, or we got some extra grant that we weren't expecting. So there needs to be a more subtle way, particularly presentationally to the community, about how we do draw down the agreed reserves when they are applied to the budget. Otherwise, you're pulling it down and putting it back, and it looks like we're underspending when actually there's huge pressures in the budget. If you look here at this budget, it's another good example. It looks like we're underspending. There's an income element to it, but actually we put in a large amount of money from reserves for different reasons, some from things we're holding with grants, others to monitor pressures. So there's significant one-off money that's gone into the budget. So in effect, the budget doesn't balance, but it looks like we're overspending, which the optics aren't great. So we're working through how we manage that through the accounts to make it sure that it's a meaningful approach that we use. The second thing, just on uncertainty, it's always interesting working with the government as they currently are, because it's very short term at the moment, and there are grants that suddenly turn up on your doorstep that you weren't expecting, and some of that can be used to underwrite existing costs. So do expect that there will be some fluctuations in some of those budgets when that happens through this next year.
But can I just ask one more question, just for clarity, because I bought the wrong notebook, and I did a string in the back of my mind about the assumptions around the budget and a lot of the variances being due to vacancies, unfilled, etc. How it's
There was a question on that, wasn't there? Do you want to answer? There was a question, I think, about if we're holding significant vacancies, if we're doing without them, can we do without them long term?
No, my question was literally just around it. Is the budget based on the steady state as it is now, withholding those vacancies, or is it based on those vacancies being filled or using interim staff? It wasn't necessarily about can we do without them, because they wouldn't be there if you didn't need them.
No, but there was a question asking whether you can remove them. So that's probably the first thing just to tick off, as it was one on the list, which is that obviously holding a certain number of vacancies, they may be different posts through the year in different services. So for instance, we've got quite a number of vacancies in children's social care frontline team management, Clearly, we don't want to hold those, and we'll fill them as quickly as possible. But the next 4 might appear in adult social care frontline, for instance. Your point about the budgeting is that we budget for all the posts to be filled, not least that it gives us some wiggle room for many of them have to be filled with agency when we can't find them from permanent recruitment. And we do have a significant number in some of our key demand services. And so such as highways, such as adult social care and children's social care at the moment. I think the portfolio wants to.
Okay. Actually, Councillor Edwards was first in the pecking order.
Hi, sorry, just a couple of questions about that. It's all gone out of my head. All of this comes back as well to us looking good in terms of the people. At the moment, the first thing that people are complaining about, whether it's on social media or on the doorstep, is why am I paying so much council tax? What are we doing for their money? And it's that we need to show that we're not wasting their money. So I think that any way that we can show that we're not wasting that and making us accountable for that, if that makes sense. And the other question I'll leave because somebody else had a question. Sorry.
Councillor Waller.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to directly address Councillor Edwards' point on that, and it's a very valid point. Many of us who've been councillors for some time know exactly why we charge such a high council tax. What we've not been very good at is explaining the budget to residents. It isn't easy, which is another thing. And so we tend to go out and try and explain it when we're budget setting. I think we need to have a longer term view of trying to explain the complexities of it. And so as a consequence, my next piece in the Rutland Mercury is all about that very topic. Well, it's online and all the rest of it as well. But that, I mean, I take your point and we haven't talked about it. So it is coincidental that I'd actually come to the same conclusion, and that is what I'm writing about next time.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just come back to the points that were being made about budget and Councillor Beggy was making about looking at monthly results. I think we've got to understand when you embark on a 4-year financial plan, it's a 4-year financial plan. And the important thing is not to start picking at each month, although questions may be valid, but the important thing is the trend, to quote your phrase earlier on. And it's really important that you stick to the trend, because if you constantly adjust the steering wheel, you'll end up spinning around. And I've seen it before where people focus very much on the monthly results. What matters is the journey you're going on from April to March each year, and can you manage that journey? Because the shape of it will always change. The key thing we need to do is make sure that the savings we want are progressive through the year, so that we're able to give ourselves the time to achieve them. Now that depends on the capability of the staff, it depends on the capability of the managers managing those staff, and it depends on the capability of us to make sure we keep targeting. And I'm including myself in the team with Kirsty and Mark here, because if what we do is pick up monthly variances, we'll be missing the plot. The plot is to save the right amount of money whilst maintaining services as far as possible, but changing them, transforming them in ways that we don't fully know yet, to be honest, but we know we need to go there, and we know we need to engage our staff to be able to get there, because it's their ideas. It's always the ideas that come from the staff. It's not the managers. It's really important to engage them. And so what we need to do is engage people in a way of transforming services and keep an eye always on the horizon, and not worry about the bumps in the middle, providing the horizon stays in the same place.
Councillor Beggy.
Andrew, I agree with you 100%. Direction of travel is key, and I didn't mean monthly, I meant quarterly. At max, if I said monthly, I apologise, but you're absolutely right. It's direction of travel. That's what we need to be able to see. And just to come back on a point Gail made is, I think that sums up a whole issue with our communications programme when you say in the Mercury. That's
If I may, Chairman, it's only the Mercury that asked me to write.
Tomorrow the Times. Are there any other questions? I think the only comment I actually had on the accounts that I found interesting is that there are savings that are highlighted. We've benefited from particular savings against particular headings, and it's not clear whether those are actually sustainable or they're one-offs, and that's the only worthwhile observation I had to make. So that brings us to, unless there are any other questions, that brings us to just to draw the discussion to a close. And so the motion before us is that the committee notes the contents of the 2022-23 revenue and capital outturn report as set out in report number 104/202/2023. So could I have a proposer and a seconder for that motion? Thank you. And could I have a show of hands for those in favour of the motion? Are there any against? I don't believe there are. And there are no abstentions. Thank you. So it is resolved that the committee notes the contents of the 2022-23 revenue and capital outturn report as set out in report number 104/2023. And I've now completely lost the plot. It's item 15, the scrutiny improvement plan draft. And so we've received a copy of the proposed scrutiny improvement plan as drafted by the scrutiny officer, and that has been circulated amongst us. And do we have any further comments or questions regarding the improvement plan as currently circulated to you? And are there any comments at all? No, thank you. So the question then is we need to finalise this document, and I believe it is actually close to finalisation and in a position to be adopted by us. Are there any members who, along with myself as chair and the support of the scrutiny officer, would like to finalise the documents? No volunteers. Then I shall finalise the document with the scrutiny officer, and it will be circulated as the final and to be adopted document. And we'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is item 16. Is there any urgent business? Sorry.
I have not been notified of any urgent business, Chair.
Thank you. And that brings us to the final item, which is the date of the next meeting. Date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 21st of September 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chamber. And I therefore declare this meeting closed at 8:48. Thank you.